Okay, I'm back for part 8. I'm going to start with just a little view of my shirt. Yes, it's all upside down, and there's a very good reason for it. I just noticed that the first part of this audio-visual presentation has gotten over 400 views in the last week or so. So that means hopefully I'll have 400 people that'll watch this to the end. I'm reading Dyslexia in the Classroom by Dr. Dale R. Jordan. I've made an executive decision. I'm skipping Chapter 3 and jumping right to Chapter 4. And the reason is, Chapter 3 is Auditory Dyslexia, which we've all heard of ad nauseum for 20 years, about this being the only form of dyslexia, which is not true, you'll find. And that's really my purpose for 12 years of doing all of this stuff. Basically at no charge, okay? I feel it's that important for people to get this message for the benefit of the thousands, hundreds of thousands of visual dyslexics that have been ignored. All right, so I'm skipping from Chapter 3, Auditory Dyslexia in the Classroom. I'm skipping over to Chapter 4, which is Dysgraphia in the Classroom. Okay, and here we go. Chapter 4, Dysgraphia in the Classroom. Handwriting is a sensitive personal matter. Under certain conditions, graphologists may introduce handwriting analysis as court evidence, testifying that one's script is a unique signature of the writer's personality. Partly because of its personal nature, penmanship practice has been one of the least popular school activities. Now remember, this book was written in 1977. It is a second edition. The first book with the same title was written in 1972. So things have changed in 50 years. But some of you are old enough to remember this. Partly because of its personal nature, penmanship practice has been one of the least popular school activities, particularly among boys. In the present curriculum, a trend is developing to remove pressure from primary students to perfect their handwriting. The students are no longer expected to fill pages with push-pulls and smoke screens, remembered well by older persons. I don't even remember those. Gradually, teachers seem to be accepting uniqueness in student penmanship, so long as the writing is legible. Ironically, old-fashioned penmanship drills may have remediated a form of dyslexia which is a growing educational problem in modern classrooms. Since the advent of manuscript printing, which is basically what we call just printing, in primary grades, many intelligent youngsters have not learned to write acceptably. 50 years ago, stereotyped penmanship drills saturated children with perceptual awareness of letter formation. Today, increasing thousands of students are writing failures. The inability to cope with handwriting is called dysgraphia. This term refers to difficulty in producing legible handwriting. Dysgraphia involves faulty control of the muscle system used to encode letters and word forms accurately. The dysgraphic student usually has a clear mental image of what he intends to encode, but he finds himself forgetting how to write specific symbols. Certain letters are made with backward or upside down motions. Handwriting is generally so awkward and unsatisfactory that dysgraphic students avoid situations where they have to practice penmanship whenever possible. Many dysgraphic persons do learn to read acceptably. Dysgraphia, however, is generally associated with both visual and auditory dyslexia. Teachers and clinicians seldom see one form of dyslexia which is not complicated to some degree by other symptoms of impairment. When seriously dysgraphic children are permitted to use alternate means of encoding, such as typewriters or dictation machines or computers, handwriting disability can be largely ignored as an educational problem. So long as educators insist that all children master legible cursive style, dysgraphia will continue to be a frustrating educational handicap. Dysgraphia syndrome. It is important that teachers distinguish between careless handwriting habits and perceptual impairment. Boys often reject the restrictions of attractive writing style. Since teachers tend to judge student competence by the neatness of written work, dysgraphic students are at a serious disadvantage. There are definite characteristics which differentiate dysgraphia from just plain carelessness. This problem is not difficult to diagnose in the classroom in view of the wide variety of handwriting specimens available from each student's quota of written work handed in for evaluation. Difficulty learning alphabet forms. The primary characteristic of dysgraphia is the student's difficulty in remembering how to form certain letters. The classroom teacher might not identify this flaw unless she watches the child write. Cursive writing style is intended to flow from left to right. Dysgraphia involves the tendency to work backwards from right to left. So long as primary pupils print isolated letter forms in manuscript style, this backward tendency presents a rather minor problem because the letters are not connected in series. Dysgraphia becomes a crippling factor as children are expected to develop skill in left-to-right cursive writing style, usually taught in grade 3. Few adults seem aware of the staggering perceptual burden modern education has placed upon beginner pupils, so far as the written symbol system of our language is concerned. Adults who have attained literacy and handwriting fluency tend to regard primary education as the mastery of 26 alphabet letter forms. Unfortunately, this is a false conception of primary instruction. Since the early 1930s, American educators have taught manuscript print in grade 1. Yet the alphabetic sequence A through Z is not taught as a rule. Instead of learning 26 letter forms, primary pupils are expected to master 2 sets of alphabet symbols, including capital and lowercase forms, for a total of at least 104 alphabet symbols. Since many manuscript capital letters are distinctly different from lowercase letters, the beginner pupil must learn 52 letter forms in manuscript style, not 26. Later, when the transition is made to cursive style, 52 new letter forms must be learned, bringing the total to 104. Manuscript print is usually continued through grade 2. All of this time, young readers are exposed to a wide variety of type styles in their reading materials. The Library of Congress lists more than 100 different typefaces commonly found in leisure reading materials in America. Just a note, with all of the computer type fonts available now, it could be thousands maybe. Near the end of grade 2, or by the middle of grade 3, children are told, in effect, that manuscript style will no longer be satisfactory. Now they must forget all that they have learned and learn a new style of letter and word formation. The 52 isolated, unconnected letter forms mastered through hours and days of drill are now gradually discarded while a new handwriting style called cursive is introduced. As with manuscript print, cursive style utilizes not just the 26 letters, but rather 52 new forms. although there is similarity between several capital and lowercase symbols. By the beginning of grade 4, the primary pupil is expected to have learned to encode from memory 104 alphabet forms, which includes the unlearning of 2 years' work of learning the concepts of manuscript letter formation. Along with learning to cope with 52 manuscript symbols, primary pupils are simultaneously confronted by more than 30 printer's cues, commonly used in basal readers, library books, textbooks, and other sources of reading in elementary classrooms. Youngsters are expected to distinguish several marks of punctuation, color cues, bold face type, italics, indentation, chapter and story headings, unique page format, and a myriad of other symbols included in the repertoire of beginning reader skills. These symbol systems take on meaning only when the youngster has successfully mastered their relationship with his speaking and listening language. Few adults would willingly attempt such a staggering burden of symbol mastery within a 3-year span. The wonder is not that many children fail. The wonder is that so many do succeed. To begin a child's quest for literacy with manuscript printing is heavily defended by most educators as a feasible educational practice. This author, however, has yet to see convincing evidence that such a temporary transitional symbol system is worth 2 years of investment of teacher and pupil time, and I agree with Dale Jordan on that completely. The fact that most students achieve literacy may vindicate the use of manuscript writing in beginning instruction. The fact remains that this educational practice is a serious barrier for handicapped children who are more confused than edified by 104 alphabetic symbols within a 3-year span. Dysgraphia becomes a crippling factor as it brings the student into conflict with tradition, particularly the left-to-right pattern of American literacy. The more difficult cursive letters forms for dysgraphic children are those involving closed circular elements, such as the cursive letters D, B, P, G, F, Y, A, E, and O. Equally difficult letters are requiring a change in direction of hand movement, such as the lowercase cursive C, H, J, T, and Z. Dysgraphics frequently have difficulty remembering where to stop a sweeping or circular movement, how to swing back, and how to connect the lines of movement from complicated letter formations. And for examples, the capital cursive S, B, D, F, H, K, T, M, N, U, W, and X. And it's a little difficult for me to read those. I haven't read cursive in a long time. The dysgraphic writer has great difficulty remembering where and how to stop circular motions in order to swing accurately into the next letter when spelling out words. The difficulties are dramatically minimized when children are drilled in connected cursive style instead of in isolated manuscript forms. Classroom teachers must develop 2 skills of observation if they are to detect dysgraphia quickly. The teacher must actually observe the child at work. Dysgraphics often mask their difficulties so that the handicap may not be apparent on sample papers the teacher collects for evaluation. It is also essential for the teacher to learn to recreate the child's writing style by tracing over the student's handwriting slowly, observing the flaws in directionality, and discovering where the writing breaks down for the child. Okay, here's a little example. Again, if you're just listening to this, The book would come in handy here. Presented are two specimens of writing by an intelligent girl in grade 4. The first specimen is Glenda's attempt to write the alphabet from memory. This illustrates her confusion in transferring from manuscript to cursive style, as indicated by the mixture of the two styles in her writing. Dysgraphia is noted by her difficulty in forming the loops on the small d, b, and p. She also confuses d and b because of her initial experiences with these letter forms in isolated, unconnected manuscript style. Capital Z causes Glenda considerable confusion, as indicated by her erasures and awkward overprinting. By tracing over this child's writing attempt, the reader can feel the dyslexic confusion Glenda experiences. And there's an example of Glenda's work. Dysgraphia can become evident as the classroom teacher reviews written exercises done by her pupils. Below is a spelling exercise which Glenda wrote from dictation. Any specimen of written work can be used to screen for dysgraphia. The reader should trace slowly over Glenda's writing, saying the words over and over while tracing, just as Glenda's mumbled the words as she wrote. Small arrows beside the letters indicate the backward motions this dysgraphic student uses in writing. This chronic reversal pattern illustrates why Glenda is an extremely slow, insecure writer. A careful observer will note the many broken letters in Glenda's writing. Her cursive word forms are actually a series of pieces she has strung together in imitation of word models she has seen. In words like pig that begin with P, she starts at the bottom, marking upward, and ending in a backward loop to form the top. Since this causes her to finish inside the word, she is forced to break the continuity by arbitrarily starting the next letter somewhere near the bottom loop on the P. Initial F is also patched together because she does not recall how and when to change the direction of her hand movements. This lack of continuity causes Glenda to circle again and again when writing the small d, b, a, o, and e, as illustrated in the words barn, brown, party, duck, bear, doll, ate, goes, and play. The reader can easily imagine the near panic this child experiences during pressured writing activities in school. Boy, what we do to our kids, or did, still do. This lack of continuity causes Glenda to circle again and again when writing the D, B, A, O, and E, as illustrated in the words, I'm sorry, did I read that already? I think I did. A more serious form of dysgraphia is illustrated below in the writing of a highly intelligent boy in grade 3. This pupil's work is handicapped by a combination of visual dyslexia and dysgraphia, as revealed by the reversed letters and word elements. These dyslexic tendencies were almost entirely corrected during a 14-week cycle of intensive training which supplemented his regular classroom activities. The key to success was his mastery of cursive writing. The child practiced an hour each day until he had mastered the cursive lowercase alphabet in connected sequence. As alphabetical order and sequence became automatic, the dysgraphic problems showed below began to disappear. By the end of grade 3, this child was meeting grade level expectations in writing and spelling from dictation. Another example here. Mirror writing. An interesting form of dysgraphia is commonly called mirror writing. True mirror writing can actually be read when held up to a mirror. A complete mirror image is rarely encountered by classroom teachers, but varying degrees of this tendency are commonly found in dysgraphic work. As a rule, only certain words or portions of words will be written backwards. The counterpart of mirror writing is mirror reading, in which whole words are read from right to left. Was for the word saw, tub for the word but, no for the word on. Below is an example of mirror writing done by Vanessa, a bright child in grade 2. At first, Vanessa's teacher was perplexed by this handwriting. Not only was this young lady's first year of teaching, but also none of her professional education courses had mentioned mirror writing or any other form of dyslexia, which was true for me too, even with going back to school in the 90s to be recertified in elementary education. Nobody talked about dyslexia. Vanessa did not exhibit mirror tendencies in reading because she had partially adjusted to the left to right sequence. She was able to overcome her tendency to mirror write rather quickly when the teacher understood the nature of the handicap. Now, I want to mention, I'm going to show this, which I don't usually do here, but I'm going to show it right now. Okay, that is an example of mirror writing for a spelling test, and I ran into, over here, it's hard for me because I'm working backwards, all right, it's on this page. Okay, if you notice the word flag at the top, I can't do it. Over here, over there, flag. It's written from right to left with the number 1 all the way over in the right margin, and it's written from right to left, number 1, F-A-L-G. Okay, but all of it is backwards. And I remember my first upside down guy in 1999, I saw that on his spelling test, and it completely blew me away. Anyway, this is supposed to be a book I'm reading here. Okay, next section. Sentence structure as a guide. Significant clue to a dysgraphic student's language potential is sentence structure or syntax, which is largely camouflaged by poorly executed handwriting. 2 examples of frustrated creativity are presented below. The passages have been translated to illustrate the language maturity of each child. In each case, an interested teacher took time to decipher the messy, crudely executed handwriting, which at first glance seemed not worth wading through. When the perceptual impairment had been recognized, these children were no longer regarded as lazy and careless. They made rapid improvement through the supplemental handwriting guidance their teachers provided in the classroom. The first specimen, which was page 57, that was the one before this, is Donna's response to an unfinished story in From Faraway Places, published by Harper and Row. After reading a brief story about children picking blueberries and being startled by a loud, astonishing noise from the woods, Donna was asked to imagine what happened next and then write an ending in her own words. Okay, and this is the example of the story. Okay. Hard to see if this is an audio version, but okay. Let's see. Oh yes, I'm over here. Andrew's Christmas story, which is below in the book, represents a near tragedy in misdiagnosis according to surface evaluation of standardized scores. The WISC Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children yielded these scores: verbal IQ 103, performance IQ 110, full scale IQ 107. He achieved motor age equivalent 8.0 on the Bender Gestalt test, 6 months above his chronological age. The human figure drawing completion test yielded a score of 101 at the 53rd percentile level. His handwriting, however, was virtually illegible in daily classroom work. The psychometrist concluded that a severe emotional disturbance must exist. After all, it was reasoned, the motor indicators on the clinical test ruled out any sort of impairment in coordination. So the rigid reliance upon test scores was challenged by Andrew's classroom teacher, who had noted the sophisticated language structure in the child's work. A good teacher. A reading diagnostician identified the problem as dysgraphia, which does not always show up on clinical tests for motor development. Older students helped the classroom teacher guide Andrew through daily supplemental training in handwriting skills. Within 6 weeks, his dysgraphic symptoms had begun to disappear. This incident illustrates the danger involved when professionals look more at scores than at actual classroom performance of children. Oh boy, that's significant today, isn't it, with the standardized testing? The major flaw in Andrew's manuscript print is in the broken letter pattern. Lowercase a, h, and m are usually fragmented, with the strokes scattered apart. This gives his writing the appearance of bird scratches. Several letters are rotated toward the left, adding to the disoriented appearance of his work. These faults are remedied through practice in writing cursive styles with letters connected in sequence. Directionality, and this is very, very important to the section on visual dyslexia also. They're very much entwined. Directionality. A crippling aspect of dyslexia is the inability to perceive parts of a whole in relation to the axis or central position of the whole. For example, students are expected to read horizontally from left to right. In writing, the hand is supposed to progress horizontally from left to right with the page tilted slightly toward the left. If a page is designed, and that's for a right-hander, if a page is divided into columns, the student is expected to progress downward until his eyes or hand reach the bottom line and then move directly upward and to the right for the next column. Since our entire culture is predicated upon the left to right, top to bottom orientation, anyone who perceives reading or writing differently is wrong. Left-handed writers frequently develop a legible writing style, although they appear to write upside down or backward. This unorthodox compensation of lefties has frustrated many penmanship teachers who feel that correct pen-to-shoulder alignment is a sacred ingredient for sound scholarship. But left-handed students have persisted in their unique writing styles, orthodox protests notwithstanding. A subtle but common problem associated with dysgraphia is a confusion with horizontal and vertical directionality. Occasionally, totally inverted perception is seen by clinicians. Again, this is one of the reasons why his book is so unique. You won't find this anywhere else. I'm going to read that again. A suitable but common problem associated with dysgraphia is a confusion with horizontal and vertical directionality. Occasionally, totally inverted perception is seen by clinicians and teachers too. Such individuals read exactly upside down, perceiving symbols at 180 degrees rotation from normal. Because these students are usually capable readers, that's if nobody's tried to correct them, their upside down orientation is often not discovered in the classroom. This kind of skewed perception becomes a problem as children begin to adapt to typical perceptual style. Teachers frequently see certain students turning the page halfway around a 90-degree angle. Such behavior often indicates that the child perceives at 90 degrees rotation. For these readers, the print becomes legible only when the rows of words are vertical, up and down, or 90 degrees from the horizontal. This disorientation usually disappears as children are indoctrinated as to correct orientation concepts. The tendency seems to bother teachers more than it does the affected children. So basically, Dr. Jordan is saying, if the teacher doesn't interfere, the child will figure out what angle they have to hold their book at or their paper at in order to make sense of print. Directional confusion does not create a problem in handwriting, however. This form of dysgraphia is Directional confusion does create a problem in handwriting, however. This form of dysgraphia is frequently camouflaged by extremely poor letter formation or by the generally messy appearance of the student's papers. As the dysgraphic student attempts to write, particularly with no visual model to follow, directional confusion creates erratic production, with much erasing and writing over, with blank spaces left if the student cannot cope with the task at all. In writing on unlined paper, the lines usually slant or wobble up and down from the horizontal axis, as illustrated in Donna's story, Ending About the Bear. When moving from the bottom of one column to the top of the next, the writer sometimes exhibits a mirror perception of the vertical axis, writing on the left-hand side of the midline instead of on the right. Here's that example. An example of this directional confusion is given below. Todd was a bright boy in grade 2. His mental ability, as measured by the WISC, was full-scale IQ 112, with 30 points discrepancy between verbal and performance IQ levels. This kind of discrepancy is frequently found in dysgraphic students. The following specimens are taken from his performance on the Slingerland screening tests for identifying children with specific language disability. I don't know if these are still used. They may be, or at least a new version. For grade 1 and beginning grade 2. The examples are from dictation tests which allowed no visual models for Todd to see or copy. He was working strictly from memory of letter forms and directionality. Okay, so again, I can't show you all of the examples because of what we're doing here. Copying simple shapes. An earmark of dysgraphia is the inability to copy simple geometric shapes without distortion. This is often referred to as conservation of form. Teachers assume that children can hold mental images of what they see while those images are translated into fine muscle patterns for drawing or writing. Dysgraphia is the inability to do this complex perceptual task. Classroom teachers with limited budgets can use any activity with children involving copying circles, squares, diamonds, triangles, or rectangles. It is important to allow for immaturity in younger children in primary grades. Dysgraphia is indicated only when other symptoms are also present in the child's handwriting and orientation tendencies. Item 7 of the Jordan Written Screening Test, this is Dr. Jordan's own test that he put together, illustrates this dysgraphic tendency. The following examples demonstrate how this simple activity reveals dysgraphic tendencies. This work was done by a student in grade 6, age 12-9, with mental ability within the average range. Okay, and here are the pictures of the shapes. A frequently observed flaw in copying shapes is the tendency to draw ears at the corners of simple figures. Classroom teachers can observe this tendency in arithmetic exercises and art activities which involve students in sketching or copying shapes and figures. The following specimens of ears were observed while students were being given the Stanford-Binet intelligence scale. Rather than indicating low intelligence, these failures represent perceptual impairment, which was eventually diagnosed as dysgraphia. Each student was asked to draw a figure just like the one on the booklet. A model of a large diamond was printed on the booklet for visual cues. And these are all examples of what they looked like. The Stanford-Binet intelligence test, or intelligence scale, contains another performance item which is an especially accurate indicator of dysgraphic tendencies. At age 9 year, at the 9th year, 3-month level, the student is presented with a card which has 2 sketches. After studying the sketches for several seconds, he is supposed to draw them from memory. Tendencies toward rotation from the horizontal plane, as well as failure to observe minimal cues, are illustrated by the kinds of drawings shown below. When other dysgraphic characteristics are seen in the student's handwriting, this subtest of the Stanford-Binet is helpful in diagnosing dyslexia. In these examples, each child reversed the order of the sketches, drawing the last one first. Again, more diagrams and examples of the work. Telescoping. When dysgraphic students are laboring to encode longer words, they commonly leave out portions of the letters or symbols without being aware of this error. The effort of putting down word units on paper is a laborious process for dysgraphics. After writing for a brief time, they tend to lose track of how much of a word form has been encoded. This habit is called telescoping, as illustrated in the spelling errors on page 39. Students who tend to telescope are usually handicapped by auditory dyslexia, as well as dysgraphia. Perseveration. The opposite of telescoping is perseveration. This problem involves the inability to turn loose of a pattern once the student has begun to produce a particular sequence. Perseveration is sometimes observed in oral reading or conversation when the teacher tends to repeat vocal patterns unnecessarily. Occasionally, perseveration occurs during rhyming drills, as when a child responds to cat by saying that, dat, lat, nat, wat. This is not an effort to be amusing in most cases. True perseveration is an involuntary reaction. The child is momentarily unable to stop his repeating reflex. Dysgraphic children are often unable to halt the reproduction of certain letters or syllable patterns without completely stopping their work. Perseveration also results when children habitually lift their pencils from the paper midway through writing a word. This break in continuity leaves them unable to recall where they stopped in the word pattern. Okay, and now we have a checklist. Okay, this is Dr. Jordan's checklist for dysgraphia characteristics. This checklist can help classroom teachers distinguish between immaturity or poor instruction and perceptual impairment. It is important that judgment be withheld until an unmistakable cluster of dysgraphic symptoms has been identified in a child's handwriting behavior. Okay, difficulty with alphabet or number symbols. The child does not remember how to write certain letters or numerals. The child distorts shapes of certain letters or numerals. The child's overall writing effort is awkward and uneven. He has difficulty transferring from manuscript to cursive style, so always mixing them up. He continues to print manuscript style long after introduction to cursive style. Fragments he fragments certain letters or numeral forms. His writing resembles bird scratching or is virtually illegible. He or she has difficulty distinguishing between capital and lowercase letter forms. And she mixes capital and lowercase forms. Okay, next section is confusion with directionality. The student writes certain letters, numerals, or words in mirror image. The student tends to write on the mirror side, the left side of vertical midline when moving to the next column. The student marks from bottom to top when forming certain letters or numerals. She uses backwards, clockwise motions when forming loops in certain letters or numerals. So when you're forming these loops, when you're doing cursive, certain ones are supposed to be done clockwise and certain ones are counterclockwise. Okay, so in this case, clockwise is backwards from what they should be doing. The student erases or overprints habitually to change directions of certain letters or numerals. And the student's writing tends to slant up, down, or to wobble up and down. The next section is sentence structure. The student composes meaningful content in spite of poor handwriting. So this is telling you something. If you can't read their work, but after really looking at it closely, you see that they have good ideas and meaningful content, then obviously we're dealing with a smart child here, and it's not just a problem with inability. The student transposes grammatical elements within the sentences, but produces good overall meaning. The student tends to use complete sentence forms instead of fragments. I guess that's a good thing, if you can figure them out. The next section, difficulty conserving form in copying simple shapes. The student distorts simple shapes like triangles, circles, squares. The student fails to close the corners, so you get those ears. The student draws ears where lines meet or change direction. The student has difficulty reproducing simple designs from memory. The student's work deteriorates toward the end of writing exercise. And she has difficulty staying on lines when tracing. Next section is tendency to telescope. The student omits letters when writing words. The student omits syllables or sound units when writing words. The student runs letters and words together. The student runs words together, usually when copying. And the last section is the student tendency to perseverate. The student adds unnecessary letters or sound units to written words. She repeats the same letters or syllables in written words. She or he adds unnecessary sound units to spoken words. He repeats syllables or sound units in spoken words. And the last one is, she falls into parrot-like repetition of rhyming units during games or conversation. And that is the end of, I believe, chapter 4, right? I think. Yes, that's the end of chapter 4. Again, Dr. Jordan presents a lot of references. Okay, this was very, very carefully put together. Plenty of references if you want to check on where he gets his information. Okay, I believe we'll go into chapter 5 next, correcting visual dyslexia in the classroom. Thanks for watching.